None of these shots were actually captured on a macro lens. I used a much cheaper, much simpler technique using my existing lenses, and all it cost me was about $30. You just need one of these, or a set of these. This is a diopter. It's basically like adding a magnifying glass to the front of your lens, and what it's going to do is shift the minimum focus by a certain amount. They come in different strengths, and basically people use them for two functions. You can either use them to improve the minimum focus of your lens. So maybe you just want to get a teeny bit closer to your subject than your lens allows, then you can use diopters for that. Or you can go pretty wild and essentially convert your existing lenses into macro lenses. Sometimes it's our kit that limits what we can achieve creatively, stopping us from getting those heart-stopping close-ups or inching even closer to uncover hidden details at the macro level. And in our attention economy, the extreme close-up is one of the few moves left that still makes audiences feel like they're seeing something for the very first time. Most basic diopters are also pretty dirt cheap. You can pick them up for around $20 to $30, £30 in the UK, although you can spend crazy money on diopters if you need the absolute best optical quality. The other cool thing about diopters is that they just give you a bit more flexibility than just owning one single macro lens. So if you own a macro lens, it's likely that the focal length of that lens is probably going to be in the region of 90 to 130 mil. And then obviously you're stuck with that focal length. With diopters, you can chuck them on the front of any lens. So case in point, on a recent project, we used diopters to capture like a cool POV shot of a pencil being used to create a drawing. We started with the 75mm. These were the 5-box Chimera C lenses, but I just decided this looked a little bit too vanilla, a little bit too pedestrian, and I wanted to see what it looked like if I opened it up and just went wider. So I took the widest lens on the set, the 21mm, chucked the diopter on, and I just absolutely loved the shot. It's a lot wilder, it's a lot more interesting, and it just gives much more perspective and context, a larger field of view of the kind of macro environment, and just extends what the viewer sees in terms of this pencil shot with the artist drawing. And if we'd used a large macro lens, so like my 90mm Vespid macro, that thing is bulky and it's heavy and it's large, and it just probably wouldn't have allowed us to get this little pencil setup with a magic arm and small camera, and the artist would really have struggled to hold this setup in their hand and draw at the same time. It just would have been a really unstable rig. Here I'm shooting on the 35mm Sirui Saturn anamorphic lens. It's a small budget anamorphic lens with an absolutely terrible close focus. I think its minimum focus distance is like half a meter or something. But by modifying the lens by using a set of cheap diopters, I was able to get a full sequence of shots from wides, mids, close-ups to extreme close-ups of eyes. So using these cheap diopters effectively gave me a much larger focal range to play with, even though I only had one lens. And that's so affordable that I've just ended up buying multiple different sizes of diopters to suit my different lens sets, because they're so cheap it's almost the same cost of buying separate step-up rings for one set of diopters. But you don't have to get screw-on diopters either. They do come in as drop-in filters for stuff like matte boxes. Those tend to be a little bit more expensive because they're a little bit more specialized. So one thing to note, that adding a diopter doesn't increase the focal range on your lens. It basically shifts the focal plane forwards to give you a shorter minimum focus distance, and it compresses the focal range as well. And what it will normally do is drag the maximum focus distance of your lens, which would be infinity, and pulls it closer. And the way to work this out is basically if you set your lens to infinity, your maximum focus distance and how it's changed will be 1 divided by the strength of the diopter. So if you add a +1 strength diopter, 1 divided by 1 is basically the maximum focus distance will become 1 meter. So your infinity focus will be 1 meter. If you add a +2, it'll be 0.5 meters, 50 centimeters. If you add a +3, 0.33 centimeters, and so on and so on and so on. So the end result of that means that you will have to move your camera closer to your subject with increasing strengths of diopter, which might make it tricky in some circumstances, because by the time you get up to like a 10 strength diopter, your camera lens and the diopter are pretty much kissing the subject. One of the great things about diopters is that they don't affect incoming light transmission, so there's not really any light loss. but they will compress your focal range and decrease your depth of field. So one of the things you'll find is as you increase the strength of the diopter, you will probably find that you'll need to stop your lens down more and more to keep enough of your subject in focus. So you may need to push more light onto your scene or push your ISO up anyway in camera to account for this. And what's also cool is if you're using an autofocus lens, then you're still going to get that function even when slapping a diopter on front of it. One of the things to definitely bear in mind is that if you are using stronger diopters and you're stopping down your lens, you're going to realize how dirty your kit is very quickly in terms of your camera sensor, your lens, and maybe even the diopter. So fibers, hair, dust, and stuff like that. So you really want to make sure that your sensor, your lens, is squeaky clean to avoid all of this dirt showing up on your shots. Also, when you check on the stronger diopters, you'll probably start to notice a lot more distortion, stuff like chromatic aberration and funkiness creeping into the frame, and maybe also like a big fall off in sharpness, especially around the edges. The cheaper diopters at this range will definitely show their quality here. And that's really where the money is going when you're buying more expensive diopters. Personally, I really like the funkiness that some of this stuff introduces, especially when you're getting like shots that might be a bit more abstract and unusual anyway. You know, dirtying up the frame and adding a little bit more grunge and distortion is not necessarily a bad thing in my book, and, you know, can actually be used to decent creative effects. I think everyone should just own a cheap set of these diopters and just keep them in their kit bag. You don't have to use them for crazy wild macro stuff. You can just use them subtly to increase the minimum focus of your kit. So, you know, one of the shortcomings of a lot of budget lenses, especially anamorphic lenses, is that they don't always have a great minimum focus. So this is a really cheap, affordable way of just extending the use case of those lenses and overcoming some of those shortcomings of affordable kits. And also, I rarely bring macro lenses along with me on shoots unless I specifically plan to capture macro stuff. And there have been so many occasions where I've just whipped out my set of diopters, chucked them on the lens, got a few quick insert macro shots, and these have always helped to elevate projects when I've done this. Anyway, I hope this one was useful. I'll leave some links to buy some diopters, affordable diopters, in the description down below. I often get asked which brands to buy in terms of like the cheap Amazon ones. Honestly, I think they're all made in the same factory in China and just rebranded. All of them are good. They all seem to be the same quality. There are a few more premium brands that you can get. I'll also link those in the description below. So if you absolutely need the best optical quality when it comes to diopters, definitely check those out too. Anyway, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.